Do you like to hang out in the library? Have I got a book for you? Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I am reviewing The Book That Wouldn't Burn, part 1 of the Library Trilogy by Mark Lawrence. And this review will be spoiler free. And as you can see, I'm holding in my hand an arc of The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which is why it says on the front, all books fall to dust. But the greatest stories can reach the stars, and this is one story that definitely reaches the stars. I have read 9 books previous to this by Mark Lawrence, and with every book by him that I read, I love his writing more, and that is the case once again. I'm going to join the chorus of people saying this is my favorite Mark Lawrence book so far. It is a contender for my favorite book of the year. I just have so much to say right now. Usually when I finish a book that I love, I bask in the feel of it when I finish. Turn that last page and just savor what I just experienced. There was something different that happened to me with The Book That Wouldn't Burn. It's one of those books that transforms as you read it, where the stuff that you encounter later on makes you rethink the stuff that you read way back in the beginning. And what I really wanted to do, I had this almost undeniable urge to just start and read the book again. I have never experienced quite as strong a feeling of just wanting to just turn the last page and I have to read this thing again. It was amazing. I haven't read anything else really quite like this before. It's difficult really to compare The Book That Wouldn't Burn to really almost anything, but it does definitely have Mark Lawrence's usual genre-bending, genre-denying qualities. You can read it definitely as a fast-paced story. It is that. It is a fast-paced story that is full of action, especially the last third or so of the book, I would say. There is mystery and intrigue, and there's a touch of romance as well, and some beautiful, just gorgeous character work, the sense of layer upon layer of history. It is just incredible, a really great read for all of that. But you can also read it as a love affair with books and the spaces that hold books. And you can also read it as a puzzle that delivers mind-bending shocks and from which the reader really just slowly unlocks some of these heavy-hitting themes that I'm going to be talking about in a moment. So I mentioned a puzzle a moment ago, and I think it's highly appropriate that Mark Lawrence was featuring on social media a puzzle of the cover of The Book That Wouldn't Burn. Yes, right, a puzzle that he was putting together slowly. And I think maybe, just maybe, that Mark Lawrence was sending a bit of a message there with this puzzle of the cover, which perhaps you could even purchase if you're interested in. I think it's, I see what you did there, Mark Lawrence. It is a puzzle in a way, this book. It's a fun puzzle, even as it's a wonderful story. It is, in the sense of being a puzzle, it's highly referential and sometimes even self-referential. It invites you to figure out what's going on in layers and layers. There are these very playful epigraphs, some of which I think maybe Mark Lawrence took some liberties with some of those epigraphs. But what epigraphs are wonderful for is hinting at the themes that are going to be embedded in the story, and these are fantastic epigraphs for that. And it's referential in the names. I recognized a few of those names that Mark Lawrence put in there, and if you're at all plugged into the indie fantasy community, then you'll probably recognize some of those names as well. And probably there's a bunch of them that went over my head that I didn't recognize, but he has fun with the names in there. It's also referential in that there are all kinds of allusions from biblical to Mark Lawrence's own books. I'm looking at Crath City, which is the setting, the main setting for the story, And readers of The Broken Empire will most certainly recognize that name, Krath City. But you do not need to have read any Mark Lawrence books before picking up The Book That Wouldn't Burn. That is certainly not it's more of an Easter egg kind of thing. And I think you recognize what this setting is by the time you settle into the story after some time. But it is most certainly, in many senses, this book is a puzzle that resolves into something enticing and new with every piece that falls into place. It invites you to wrestle with it. And this is something that I enjoyed tremendously because the story the whole time was carrying me with it simultaneously. So I never felt like it was work, more that I was just, my curiosity was driven with every page. And a lot of this is achieved with Mark Lawrence's trademark messing around with chronology. He likes to mess around with chronology. And he has this sciencey brain. He's a trained scientist with math and physics and all that sort of thing, running around in his head. So I think that definitely lends to, even though you could call this a fantasy, also the science fiction feel of all of this. But here, the scale of his time tricks is just absolutely mind-boggling and awe-inspiring, and it becomes a really important part of the story. Now, I mentioned the themes, the heavy-hitting themes, and they're just wonderfully woven into this, seamlessly woven into this beautiful stuff, starting with the power of stories. This is huge in here, the power of storytelling. There are a lot of books out there. A lot of them are dedicated more purely to knowledge. A lot of nonfiction books fall in that category. But there is also something to the truths that we convey through stories. And the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves as individuals, but also as a culture, as a society. Our history is, in fact, a narrative. And this book is very much about the stories that we tell ourselves and that we wrap our identities around. And this really leaks into another of Lawrence's themes in here, which is the nature of memory and how our identities are wrapped around our memories. We are our stories in many, many ways. And along with us telling our stories about ourselves, we also have the other part of the story, the other. And The Book That Wouldn't Burn really takes head on the theme of otherizing and how we can recognize suddenly ourselves in the other, and how earth-shattering that can be, how that can destroy our preconceived notions based on the stories that we tell ourselves. And also you have mixed in with this the nature of knowledge. There is a lot in here about knowledge, which has both good and ill repercussions for humanity. I mean, we have been incredibly creative with our knowledge and simultaneously incredibly destructive. And so Lawrence really hits home with this theme about the nature of not just knowledge, but information. We live in an age of information. And I find this book to be extremely timely in that sense, with more information available at people's fingertips than ever before in human history. With the internet, we have a lot of access to information, but also to disinformation. And that is a big theme in here, how information and disinformation are used to manipulate people, and what are the motives going on there, and how that plays into the otherizing that I mentioned just a moment ago. And you also have some good old loyalty and love and friendship. One of Lawrence's, I think, favorite themes, that he's so brilliant at portraying this theme, is friendship and found family and that sort of thing. He does so just beautifully, which brings me to the characters. There are two main POVs, Levira and Evar, and they are such beautifully realized characters. The narrative goes back and forth between these two perspectives, which begin very far apart. And as most fantasy books do, a lot of things begin to converge during the course of the story. And it is fascinating to see the ways in which Lawrence achieves this convergence. There are some other characters in here, secondary characters, non-POV characters that are also just brilliant. Shout out to Malar, one of my favorites in there for sure. But you've got this cast of characters, including the two POVs, who are quirky, they are wounded, and they are stubborn, they are misfits. And this is really one of Lawrence's great gifts, in my opinion. He is so skilled at creating love for these endearing oddball characters of his. They have their flaws, but they also have this tenaciousness that just has me rooting for them, absolutely rooting for them. I care for these characters. I am hugely invested in these characters, and that is the mark of a great author. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention there are some animal companions, sort of, kind of animal companions in there, and some humor. This is okay. Mark Lawrence is a very witty writer, and I really enjoy his sense of humor. He's great at making clever banter between characters and that sort of thing. But there are some great dad jokes in here as well. A couple moments where I absolutely groaned and laughed simultaneously. So it was just a lot of fun. Mark Lawrence is one of the most clever writers I've ever read, and that also really makes these books of his just so entertaining, and The Book That Wouldn't Burn is no exception. So I find myself very eager, highly anticipating books 2 and 3 in this trilogy. I simply cannot wait. I believe that the Library Trilogy could very well be an enduring masterpiece that transcends genre. And I am so excited to see where Mark Lawrence takes this one. So, those are my thoughts, and until next time.